The car wasn't just a car. It was the first thing I had ever built entirely on my own, something that didn't come from family, luck, or permission. Every late shift, every skipped plan, every quiet night where I chose work over comfort had gone into it. I still remember the first time I held the keys in my hand, standing in that small parking lot, realizing that for once in my life, something actually belonged to me. Not borrowed, not shared, not controlled by anyone else. Mine. Growing up in that house, ownership was never really mine to claim. Things were always temporary, always conditional, always tied to someone else's decision. My brother never seemed to notice that difference. He didn't have to. Life had a way of arranging itself around him, smoothing out obstacles before they ever became real problems. Where I had to prove myself, he was already assumed to be enough. Where I had to work, he was given time. Where I had to earn, he was handed. By the time he turned 18, that difference had become normal. So normal that no one questioned it anymore. The house was louder than usual that evening, filled with music and voices that didn't belong to me. Cars lined the street. People moved through the rooms like they owned the place, and somewhere in the middle of all of it was my brother, smiling like everything in the world had always been meant for him. I stayed upstairs longer than I should have, not because I didn't want to be part of it, but because I already knew how these nights worked. I had seen enough of them to understand that whatever happened, it wouldn't be about me. Still, my dad called me down, his voice carrying through the hallway like an expectation rather than an invitation. I walked into the living room slowly, letting the noise settle around me, letting my eyes adjust to the scene. And that's when I saw it. The keys. They were in his hand, held just high enough to catch the light, just visible enough to draw attention. For a second, I didn't think anything of it. It didn't make sense yet. It didn't need to. But then the room started to quiet, conversations fading as people turned toward him, and I felt something shift before he even spoke. "This," he said, his voice steady, confident, practiced, "is for you." My brother blinked, confused for a moment, then curious, then excited as realization started to catch up with him. My mom stepped closer, her expression already full of pride, already certain of the moment they were creating. And then the keys changed hands. And everything slowed down. Because I knew those keys. I didn't need to see them up close. I didn't need confirmation. I had held them too many times, felt their weight too many times, built too much around them not to recognize them instantly. They were mine. The room erupted into applause, laughter filling the space as if something incredible had just happened. My brother looked down at them, then back up, his smile growing wider, brighter, like the moment had completed something for him. "Are you serious?" he said, half laughing, half disbelieving, and my mom nodded like there had never been another option. "You deserve it," she said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. That word stayed with me longer than the noise around it. Deserve. I stood there, just slightly outside the center of everything, watching it unfold, feeling something inside me settle instead of rise. There was no sudden anger, no immediate reaction, just a quiet clarity forming in the background of my thoughts. Because this wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be corrected with a sentence or two. This was something they had already decided, something that had been settled long before I walked into that room. My dad finally looked at me, just briefly, like remembering I was there. "You weren't really using it that much anyway," he said, his tone casual, almost dismissive, like he was explaining something simple. "And your brother needs it more right now." Needs. Another word that didn't belong to me. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I understood something more important. Arguing wouldn't change anything. It would only shift the focus, turn me into the problem, the one making things difficult in a moment everyone else was enjoying. And I had spent enough time in that role to know exactly how it ended. So I stayed quiet. I didn't reach for the keys. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even ask a question. I just watched as my brother walked toward the door, people following him, voices rising again as the moment moved outside. I followed a few steps behind, just enough to see it clearly, just enough to confirm what I already knew. He opened the car door, sat down, started the engine. And just like that, something that had taken me years to build was gone in a moment that took less than a minute. The engine sounded the same. The car looked the same. But it wasn't mine anymore. Not in the way that mattered in that house. People cheered again, someone clapping him on the shoulder, someone else laughing about taking it for a drive later. And I stood there, slightly apart from all of it, realizing something that hadn't been clear to me before. It wasn't about the car. It was about control. Because anything that could be taken from me that easily was never really mine to begin with. That night, I didn't go back downstairs. I stayed in my room, sitting in the quiet, letting the noise fade into the background until it disappeared completely. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel defeated. I felt something else. Focused. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I needed to build next. Something bigger. Something untouchable. Something no one could take, no matter how easily they thought they could. And that thought didn't fade. It stayed. Growing quietly, steadily, the same way everything else I had built always had. Because if that night proved anything, it was this. I had been building the wrong kind of thing. That night didn't break me. It redirected me. I stopped thinking about what I had lost and started thinking about what could never be taken again. A car could be handed away. Keys could change hands in seconds. But control, real control, came from something deeper, something quieter, something no one in that house had ever really understood. The next morning, nothing felt different to them. My brother left early, taking the car like it had always been his, like there had never been a moment where it belonged to anyone else. My parents moved through the house like the decision they had made was normal, justified, already behind them. And I moved through it the same way I always had. Quiet, unnoticed, already somewhere else in my mind. I didn't ask for the car back. I didn't bring it up again. Because the truth was, I had already moved past it. Not emotionally, not completely, but strategically. There was no value in fighting for something that could be taken so easily. The only thing that mattered now was building something that couldn't. So I shifted everything. More hours, more focus, less distraction. I started taking on work that most people avoided, projects that required time and patience and a level of attention that didn't give immediate results. While everyone else chased quick wins, I started building long-term value. Quietly, consistently, without needing anyone to notice. Months passed, then a year, then more. And slowly, things changed. Not loudly, not in ways that anyone in that house would immediately see, but in ways that mattered. Money stopped being something I had to think about constantly. Opportunities started coming instead of needing to be chased. Connections formed, not because of who I knew, but because of what I could do. And for the first time, I wasn't just building something, I was building leverage. Meanwhile, nothing changed for them. My brother treated the car exactly how I expected he would. Carelessly at first, confidently after, like it had always been his to use, never something that had been earned. My parents continued the same patterns, the same decisions, the same assumptions about what mattered and what didn't. And I let them, because correcting people too early only teaches them how to resist you later. Time did what it always does, it revealed things. 2 years later, I had something they couldn't see yet, but would eventually have to face. Not a single object. Not something they could point at and take. Something structural. Something built under the surface. A business. Not massive. Not flashy. But stable. Growing. And most importantly, independent. I didn't tell them about it. I didn't need to. Because I had learned something important. People only respect what they understand, and they only understand what they're forced to see. That moment came sooner than I expected. It started small. My dad's business began to struggle. At first, it was minor issues, delays, missed opportunities, decisions that didn't work out the way they expected. Then it became something else. Pressure. Financial strain. The kind that builds slowly until it can't be ignored anymore. I watched it happen from a distance. Not involved. Not interfering. Just observing. Because this time, I wasn't the one reacting to their decisions. They were reacting to a situation they couldn't control. One evening, my dad asked me to sit down with him. That alone was unusual. Conversations like that didn't happen often. Not unless something had already gone wrong. "We might need to make some changes," he said carefully, choosing his words like they mattered more now than they used to. I nodded, listening. "There's an opportunity," he continued, "but we need support. Investment. Structure." I understood what he was asking without him saying it directly. Help. From me. The same person whose work had been dismissed. The same person whose effort had been taken for granted. The same person who had stood in that living room and watched something he built be handed away without hesitation. I didn't remind him of that. I didn't need to. "Let me take a look," I said calmly. Over the next few days, I reviewed everything. Not emotionally. Not personally. Just objectively. Numbers, structure, decisions. And what I saw confirmed what I already knew. The business wasn't failing because of bad luck. It was failing because of how it was being run. And that was something I could change, but only if I controlled it. A week later, we sat down again. Same table, same room, but everything felt different now. "I can help," I said. Relief crossed his face instantly. "But it won't be the same," I added. He hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I don't invest into something I don't control," I replied. Silence followed. Not long, but long enough. Because now, for the first time, the decision wasn't his. It was mine. My mom looked between us, trying to understand what was happening, while my brother sat back, quiet for once, no longer the center of anything. "You're saying, my dad started, you'd take over?" "Yes." Simple. Clear. Final. The same way decisions had always been made in that house. Just not by me. Until now. It wasn't easy for him to accept. I could see it. The hesitation. The shift. The realization that things were no longer the way they used to be. But eventually, reality wins over pride. And he agreed. The transition didn't happen overnight. But when it was done, everything had changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. The same house. The same people. But a different balance. A different understanding. Because control had moved. And this time, it wasn't something that could be handed away in a moment. One evening, my brother walked in, holding the car keys, looking unsure for the first time since his birthday. "Do you want this back?" he asked. I looked at the keys for a second, then at him. And for the first time, it didn't matter. "Keep it," I said, because I didn't need it anymore. What I had built since then couldn't be taken. And that was the difference they finally understood. They gave him my car, but without realizing it, they gave me something far more valuable. The moment I stopped building things they could control and started building something they couldn't.